I'm Candy Church, and I'm 28, and I've been married for a year now. Being brave and being courageous looks different in our seasons of life. We all face different circumstances. I think of the different seasons that the Lord has asked me to walk on into something that has been terrifying, and they've looked totally different. There have been all kinds of different things, and I think of how He builds a story of His faithfulness in our lives in the small things of us, of walking in courage towards Him, and in the big things. Well, actually, probably about 13 years ago, and I was 17, and my mom found out she had breast cancer. And it was I think it was stage 3 or 4 when she found out. And the doctor said she needed to take chemo right away. She needed to have surgery like as soon as possible. And she came home, and my dad and her were getting ready to go forward in that, and my mom felt no peace about getting surgery or taking chemo. And she asked my dad, she's like, I'd love to pray about this, because I really just don't feel like this is where the Lord wants me to, or what the Lord wants me to do. And my dad thought it was crazy. I mean, you've got stage 4 cancer. In our eyes, you want to spare your life. You want to do whatever you can to make her healthy. And so he was set on her going through the treatments. But she asked, Jeff, can we pray and fast for 10 days? And so they did. And as a family, we prayed about what the Lord was leading her to do. And at the end of the 10 days, she was strong in her heart that she wasn't to go through chemo and she wasn't to go through the surgery. And my dad, he had a lot of fear in his heart about it, but he felt the Holy Spirit say to his heart, I've spoken to your wife, and I need you to support her in this and walk beside her in this. And he was filled with such peace. Like, this is the road the Lord's leading us on. And me and my brother, and I have 2 brothers and a sister, so there were 4 of us, and just gathered around my mom, believing the Lord for a miracle, but believing for His glory to be shown, whatever that looked like. I think my mom had cancer for about 2.5 years, and the Lord did a beautiful work in all of our hearts. But it was March 2008, and my mom really went downhill, and I remember the night really well. It was very rainy outside, and my mom hadn't been able to talk all day. And my brother and I were in her room with her all day until my dad could get home, and just worshiping, praying with her, just being with her. And then it was around 9 o'clock that night, and my brother and my dad left the room. And I remember the rain, or it started to storm. Not bad, it was just a light storm, but I went over to close the window. And when I went to close the window, my mom took a really loud breath, and it was her last breath. And I had never heard that. I didn't know what that sounded like. And fear just, overwhelmed me, and I panicked, and I went to find my dad, and I was like, she's not dead. And but as soon as my dad saw her, he knew, like, he just started to weep. And so in that moment, it was just me and my brother Michael and my dad, and despair and hopelessness were like just flooded my heart. I had no idea how I was going to live. Like the weight of that pain, like it's hard to even imagine that, because it was such a heavy grief. And I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to go on. And it was about 10-15 minutes of just grief and fear, and how are we going to do this? And I remember hearing my brother be like, God, I trust you. And that just triggered in my heart, yeah, Lord, I trust you. And my dad, and just worship began to rise in that moment. And as I was thinking about courage and bravery, the world would like to define it as we rely on our own strength, and we're so courageous and we're so brave and we can handle anything and we believe in ourselves. But in those moments, especially, they highlight how fragile and frail we are. And courage is found when our eyes are on Jesus, and when we know that He is not only with us but in us. And so I feel like there's so many things that happen in that moment, but peace, like the word says, it surpasses all understanding, absolutely filled my heart and my brother's heart and my dad's heart, and anchored us. And even in the days to come and the months to come, there was that peace and confidence that was unexplainable, except for the Lord. He was good and He was faithful, and I believe that that's where the root of courage and bravery come from, is believing and trusting that God is so good and so powerful and all wise. That was 2008. The Lord led me to go to Australia 8 or 9 months later, and that was another lesson in leaving everything I'd ever known, leaving my family behind, not knowing how they were going to make it without my mom, but really believing that that was where the Lord was leading me. And so I packed up everything and I went across the world. And there's something that happens when God just takes you out of the place you've always known, and away from the people you rely on, and the sphere of life that you rely on, and puts you in a completely new place where you're basically starting all over. And I really I believe that season of life was for so many reasons, but in that season I learned who the Lord was for me, and that He wanted to reveal Himself to me as my God, and that I would follow Him. So followed Him through that season, came back to Indiana in 2010, and my dad remarried a beautiful woman. That's a whole nother story. And I found out my little brother had aplastic anemia, and it's a lot like leukemia, but he immediately had to go to Riley, get blood transfusions, and that when I found out about Josiah, that same despair and fear just slammed into my heart, and it was almost I couldn't breathe. And I remember that moment so well. And I was with my really good friend, and I was actually down in Missouri. But I remember this moment of, yet I will praise you, Lord. And this worship began to rise out of my heart, and trusting. And I had just had that the line of that old hymn, He hideth my soul in the depths of His love. And knowing that I could walk on into whatever would come, knowing that God loved my little brother Josiah more than I did, that His ways were so good and perfect and kind. And it was 9 months later that the Lord took Josiah home to be with Him. I read Psalm 23, and David says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And I can honestly say that that's the reason. Like, we did not have to fear death, because he is with us, and he is in us and for us. And those aren't just words. If we've grown up in the church and we've grown up knowing the Lord, sometimes those seem like, yeah, I know that God is with me. But no, he's with me, like right here, like living and breathing, and so close and so near. Being able to go on, walk on into life without people that you love, and that's scary. And I remember when Josiah died, I was terrified. I didn't want to forget him. I was scared that I would just move on and be but the Lord, he intends for us to move on, and not to forget, but to walk on in healing and walk on in hope, and not live in that place of despair and sadness, because he's overcome. And so knowing that gave me the courage to walk on in healing. And there were hard days, and there's still hard days, but there's hope. And so I would say, I guess, overall of that season of life, I would just say again with that Psalms 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Courage is found because God is with us. Psalm 72, which was one of my mom's favorite passages. And even as I talk about this, like, I remember my mom, and I think of her courage to trust the Lord in not knowing what was going to happen. She was such a courageous woman. So I think of her courageous spirit and this is the psalm that she was just, I guess, just anchored her, and really has become one of like the cornerstones of in my heart. And it says, it's this theme again: I'm always with you. You hold me by your by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. Afterward, you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. So I would say to anyone on the verge of that valley, of that specific season, facing death, facing loss, facing sickness, like that the reality of Emmanuel, God with us, will be fleshed out to you. Like, you can know it here, but when you walk through the darkness, you know it here. So when you asked me to talk about courage, I was thinking of this season of my life, and I'm thinking, wow, Lord, there's nothing huge. There's nothing terrifying, it seems like, in life. Like, there are some hard things and struggles. But right now, in this season of my life, the Lord has been emphasizing pressing into the process. And when I say pressing into the process, it's pressing into Him in the midst of process. And for me, that looks like there's specific things that the Lord's been refining me in. But my natural tendency, I want to run. I think all of us, we don't like uncomfortable. We don't like awkward. We don't like feeling humble. We don't like feeling like, am I ever going to know anything? We don't like being in situations that feel like, we have to trust the Lord is enough. And my husband and I are leading worship for our church, and I've led worship over the years, and that's been I love to worship at home and with the Lord, and I'm not confident in my singing, and I could go on in insecurities, but the Lord has been like because insecurity and intimidation and comparison have just been like the plague over my life, like that I just have walked in. And the Lord is, especially this past year, it's like that's not your portion, Candy, and that's not your portion to live there in timidity and in meekness, like believing that you have nothing to say, or because I often keep my mouth quiet out of fear. I don't feel like I have anything to say. I feeling like I'm singing. It's vulnerable to me because I wish I was the best. I want to be the best. And so leading worship is a very vulnerable thing for me. Playing the piano in front of people. But the Lord is growing me as I press into Him, into that place of allowing Him to strengthen me and teach me in just specifically in learning to lead worship with my husband for a congregation that we just started going to this church, and just in new places in that, and being challenged in that in new ways. And again, my natural tendency, I want to run. I don't like this. So it's been just reminding me courage in that small, it seems small, but it's actually a huge thing, because intimidation has been something that I've battled with my whole life. And it's not part of me anymore. It can't, and it's just this year the Lord waged war against it. And that requires courage. It requires that constant bravery. And again, bravery and courage is found with our eyes on Jesus. I think of Peter going out to Jesus on the water. And I love Peter's response, because he literally just jumps out of the boat. He's not thinking about what's going to happen. He runs straight to Jesus. And he's doing great. He's walking on water. The other day I was thinking about this, and it's, again, you grow up knowing these stories, and you stop and think, you're like, literally, he's walking on water. He might as well have been flying. It's amazing. And but his eyes are on the Lord. And as soon as his eyes are off Jesus, he immediately starts to sink. And I love the Lord's response is so immediately Jesus pulls him out. And I believe that Jesus' rebuke to Peter was full of kindness. Why didn't you believe? Why didn't you trust me, Peter? And I believe that that's the Lord's response to me over and over again, Candy, believe. That's how we live brave. Eyes on Jesus. And something as small as learning to lead worship, or for me, I'm teaching a preschool class. I've gone skydiving, and I would rather go skydiving than teach a preschool class, because I'm terrified. I don't like teaching, and but it's something that the Lord is say yes. I believe that another aspect of courage is having a heart that will say yes to the Lord regardless. Will wherever you go, Lord, wherever you take me, yes. Yes, committing in your heart and purposing, no matter where He takes me, where He leads me, I will say yes. Life right now is just learning to say yes to Him in the small things, physically, wherever He would lead me and my husband, with Him relationally, with me and the Lord, with me and who He has made me to be, and walking into the fullness of that, and not shrinking back in timidity. The Lord has not given us, we know this verse so well, He's not given a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And again, I know that here, but it's fleshing that out and walking that out. And we walk that out through the uncomfortable, the awkward, the painful seasons of life, the seasons where we're wrestling through different questions, and face to face with our own weakness, where we can see the Lord's strength shine. And that's what He's looking for us to just rely on Him. I just needed to preach that to my heart, be brave, Candy, because the Lord is not going to fail you. The Lord is for you. The Lord is working through you, and He wants to gain the glory from your life more than you want Him to gain the glory. And so if I can just rely on Him, learning to rely on Him, not on my own strength, but on His. If I could sum up what bravery looks like, is simply eyes on Jesus through whatever and wherever we go, eyes on him.